So, what really separates the good from the great? The people who just nail it when it counts? Well, today we're going to dive deep and deconstruct the hidden systems behind those peak performers. Welcome to our explainer on the architecture of performance.
Okay, I want you to picture this. It's the final of a major tennis tournament. The crowd is totally silent. It's match point. The pressure is just immense. One player seems to just elevate. Every shot is calm, precise, perfect. The other player, they tighten up, make a simple mistake, and it's all over. So what's the difference there? I mean, that's really the ultimate question, isn't it?
Now, it's so easy to just say, oh, the winner just had more mental toughness. But that doesn't really explain anything, does it? It's kind of a lazy answer. The real reason is way more fascinating. It's all about a carefully built internal system, a kind of architecture that was put in place long, long before that match point ever happened.
All right, so let's start digging into that architecture, and we have to begin with the foundation, right? And that's practice. But here's the thing. We really need to challenge what most of us think effective practice actually looks like.
I'm sure you've all heard of the 10,000-hour rule, right? This idea that if you just put in enough time, you'll become an expert. But, a ton of research into expert performance shows that just counting hours can be super misleading. It's not about the sheer volume. It's the quality and the type of practice that really truly moves the needle.
And this just lays it out perfectly. On one side, you've got what most of us do, simple repetition. You're just going through the motions, you're staying in your comfort zone, the goals are kind of vague, and you almost never get any real feedback. But then, look at the other side. This is what researchers call deliberate practice, and it's the total opposite. It's super focused, it's all about pushing your limits, you have very specific goals, and you're getting immediate feedback constantly.
So, here's the key takeaway. Deliberate practice is not about mindlessly hitting 1,000 tennis balls. No way. It's about hitting maybe 100, but with the super specific focused goal of, say, improving your backhand down the line. And after every single shot, you're analyzing it, you're making tiny adjustments based on what just happened. That is how you actually build real, lasting skill. Okay, so let's say you've done the work. You've used deliberate practice. You've built these amazing skills. That's great, but that's really only half the battle. The next layer of this whole performance architecture is all about making sure those skills show up when it really, really counts. I mean, think about it. Pretty much anyone can do well when there's no pressure. But the true experts, the ones we call clutch, they're defined by something else. It's their ability to execute almost perfectly when everything is on the line. That reliability, that's what separates the pros from the amateurs. So this all leads to a really fascinating question, right? What is actually happening inside our brains during one of those clutch moments? When someone is just in the zone. It feels like magic, but it's not. It's pure neurobiology. Okay, so here's a peek inside the brain when it's in the zone. First, the activity in your prefrontal cortex, that's the part that does all the conscious thinking and analyzing, it actually powers down. This is huge because it quiets that inner voice that overthinks and doubts everything. Then the brain just hands over the controls to your automated skills. These are the pathways you've carved out with all that deliberate practice. The connections are so fast and so reliable that you can do incredibly complex things without even thinking about them. So we've been talking about the internal stuff, what's happening inside the mind of a performer. Now, let's switch gears a bit and look at a way we can measure performance from the outside. Yeah, in fields like business and statistics, they use something called performance variance. It might sound complicated, but it's a really simple and powerful idea. All it is the gap between what you expected to happen and what actually happened. The smaller that gap, the smaller the variance, the more consistent and reliable you are. This chart makes it super easy to see. Let's say your goal, your planned outcome was 100, but your actual result, 85. That 15-point gap, that's your negative performance variance. And this is what top performers are obsessed with. They work like crazy to shrink that gap, to make their actual results line up with their plans almost perfectly. But just when we think we've figured it all out, that perfect consistency is the goal, there's a twist. But just when we think we've figured it all out, that perfect consistency is the goal, there's a twist. I mean, think about this quote. In a world that's changing all the time, could being perfectly consistent actually be a bad thing? And here's the danger. If you become so consistent that you're basically a robot, you become rigid. You lose the ability to adapt. So what happens when your opponent suddenly changes their strategy or the market completely shifts? All of a sudden, that perfectly reliable old method of yours might be totally useless. And that brings us to the very top layer of our performance architecture. And honestly, this might be the most important piece of the whole puzzle. Because the ultimate goal isn't just to be a perfect robot. It's to be something far more dynamic. So you can think of it like this. There are two types of experts you can become. On one hand, you've got the routine expert. This person is a master of the known. They're super efficient at solving problems they've seen a million times. But then you have the adaptive expert. And this person is a master of the unknown. They don't just solve old problems, they innovate new solutions for brand new challenges. They actually embrace change. And that right there is really the core message of this whole thing. The ultimate architecture of performance isn't about being perfectly efficient at what you already do. It's about building a system for yourself that allows you to constantly evolve, to learn, and to adapt to whatever the future throws at you. So how do you actually build this? Well, here are 4 steps to get you there. First, you've got to master the fundamentals. You need that strong foundation of routine skill. Then, and this is key, you have to intentionally seek out new challenges. Get out of your comfort zone. Third, you have to reflect. Really analyze your successes and your failures. And finally, you have to shift your values. You have to prioritize learning and innovation over just being efficient. And so that leaves us with one last, pretty important question for you to think about. When you look at the skills you're building right now, the way you practice, the system you rely on, ask yourself this. Is it built to solve yesterday's problems, or are you building an architecture that's ready to thrive no matter what tomorrow brings?